little bit for Nico and the LPC team, Antigua. This has been great. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to share today a little about my journey, building products for B2B, and then talking about the changes and challenges that may come across when building products in a B2B space. So during the nice introduction from Nico, you learned a little about me. Quickly, I spent about 4 years in San Francisco prior to this, some time in Brazil, and I've always been kind of building in the B2B space. So you'll see here that I did a lot of machine learning and big data at Microsoft. At TravelPerk, which is a business travel startup in Barcelona, I joined there as the 4th product hire and then basically scaled with them from 60 people to over 500. And now, as Nico was saying, I'm the leading product for Abacum. So I joined them in November 2020, and we were just 8 people, and now we're 120, product team of 6, and scaling to 15 by the end of the year. So really love B2B products, and it's on purpose. So I seek this out. I think it's fun to be B2B, challenging problems. About 8 hours every day, sometimes more, sometimes less, of people's time is spent working. And 85% of people are unhappy at work. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there to provide delight in a place that's usually not thought of as delightful. It's also a very big market, so that's nice, 152 billion. And I think one of the things that I like the most from this is that when you build customer relationships, it's very strong. And it's a long-term relationship and not something that's a bit more transactional, like a $50 gift card for someone to come check out your tools in a B2C space. Within B2B, it comes with 2 functions that maybe don't exist so much in B2C or don't have as a large of an influence in where the company and product goes. This is sales and customer success. So sales, of course, out there selling the product. Customer success, when I think of that, it's about how do you get people to get value from the product. And I apologize, all of these are GIFs, so there's going to be lots of stills that may or may not make sense. We'll see. Hopefully they all pause at the right moment. So far, so good, but we'll see. How many of you work in B2B? OK, so then I'm expecting these quotes to resonate a little bit. Right? Maybe you've heard this before. Great news. We just sold the first contract with a bunch of features that don't exist yet. Or if we don't do this tomorrow, this client's going to churn for sure. Like these are things that happen in B2B. And yeah, it's no wonder some of these product teams feel like they're feature factories. It's a very easy thing to make happen. So I'm here to talk a little bit about how we can encourage people to give feedback in the right way and to create a bit more of the empowered team structure within B2B when you have these competing priorities. So by definition, sales and CS, they won't focus on the whole funnel. They have a specific role. Marketing is focused on how are you fitting in the positioning within the market. Sales is really figuring out, do you have the problem? Do you have problem market fit? And support is really focused on, can our solution provide an answer to that problem? And product is looking across this whole funnel, right? So we're looking to see how can we make sure that every single person is aligned through this, giving value throughout that whole funnel. And I think if we think about, what does this kind of structure bring, you need to look a little at the incentives of each of these organizations. So they all encourage advocating for customers differently. And I think incentives are very strong. If we think about one of the biggest incentives or strongest incentives, usually comes from how people get paid. Sales, they get paid as a percentage of revenue, typically. So that's $1 million. Maybe they take a $1 million customer. Maybe they take 1-2% of that back in bonus. And the same on customer success. Some are from a net promoter score. Some are from upsells. But usually, again, compensated here by some sort of percentage of revenue. And when they're talking to customers, you can think about where does their feedback come from. Because of this the incentive structure, likely in sales, features that are blocking their deals for this current quarter are likely to get the most noise. And they're going to be talking about them the most, because that's potentially stopping them from getting that bonus at the end of the quarter. And customer success, this is likely the customer who writes the most emails or has the highest standards from the product. So these are a little sometimes coming from places that it's not more general like we would expect from a product side. How do they pitch the product? Right? Sales is incentivized to overstate the capabilities. Well, customer success is incentivized to bend the product to the customer's needs. And then lastly, we need to think about where they spend the most amount of their time, because that's going to be the context that they're going to learn the most. In sales, they're going to spend time with the largest deal in the pipeline. This is because if you have 2 deals that are $500K apiece, and you have 1 deal that's $1 million, you get paid the same if you sell 2 or 1. So usually people like to do less work, so they go for the 1 instead of having to manage 2 client relationships, 2 technical sales, 2 of everything. They go for the bigger one. It's always the incentive to move up that chain. And then the customer success is really looking at the largest customer, again, because they have an outsized influence on their day-to-day, or sometimes the one that's closest to the boss or the founders, because that's where they're going to hear the most feedback, and that's going to potentially be the way that changes their day-to-day the most. Because at the end of the day, we're all people, and we're all thinking about incentives, and we're all thinking about how that moves us. And so what does this lead to? If this simply follow the incentives, this can lead to some optimal outcomes for the company and for product teams. One is overselling. So this is probably pretty common, I think, in some of these in B2Bs, like where you have a salesperson who is super excited about the product, and they're maybe embellishing a bit how far the product goes. Can happen. Maybe a large client owns the roadmap because they have a really high percentage of revenue, and you're really scared to say, we're just not going to do that thing for you because it could have real consequences to your business. Or maybe you're feeling the support crunch, right? And yeah, this is supposed to be Spider-Man pointing at each other, where sales sells this thing, product says, no, we don't have that, and then support's like, but I have to deliver, and so they kind of get stuck in the middle there with everyone pointing fingers at them. Or it can mean large profit-limiting support teams. To enable all these customers to get the value, you might have to have quite a large support team there. I believe this comes from 2 places. One is there's a short-term focus, generally, within areas of hyper-focus. And then it's a bit about lack of trust and communication. And yeah, sorry about the memes. So the first one I think is the easiest one to solve for me. So going from a short-term focus, how do you go long-term? I think this means we need to seek employers that give meaningful equity to all employees. Because salary is one piece of compensation, and that usually lets you think a little bit more short-term. But longer-term, equity, if you grow the company, if you grow the influence of the company, that should be a bigger financial outcome for anyone who is thinking longer-term. And especially true for product people, where we might have some of the ability to have the most impact on that company valuation. And then the second is we need to build trust. How do we build trust? So one thing that's worked really well for me is actually inviting people from customer success to get involved in product processes and product ceremonies. So at both companies, TravelPerk and now Abacum, we actually have our customer success team working embedded within our product teams. So they'll work between 1 and 3 days a week, working with us to bring that voice of the customer directly into the engineering team, directly into design, directly into product. Because I think we all like to think we're the voice of the customer, but I can almost guarantee that sales and customer success spend more time with customers than we ever will. So having them come in and give that feedback in the beginning at definition, and again at the end when you're releasing, is invaluable. And the nice part about this is that afterwards, you now have a champion within that org who can help you to lead through change, to answer questions, and provide that kind of first line of defense for the broader organization. And they'll be able to do that very well. Next is, always follow up with a list of prospects or customers when you release something. So we had this very simple, these are the squads that we had in the beginning that were running at Abacum, and we just had a Notion page where someone put a ticket, like following kind of the shape-up model. Anyone could suggest a product improvement or give us customer feedback. And then we had this kind of database. And so every time one of the squads would release, we would check this database, see who it affected, and then share that back with them so that we could always be in that constant communication. Because sales looks great when they say, hey, prospect, we did this thing you wanted. And the same for customer success. So help them look great. And do that by equipping them with the things they need to tell the story. Right? So this is something that was releasing next week, actually. It's a big release for us. It allows for multi-dimensional forecasting. It's really great things if you're in finance and love planning and budgeting as much as I do. Maybe not for the broader audience, but I'm really pumped about this. And this is really the whole one-pager about giving the context and then having this Q&A. I think that's really important, having a Q&A, running this asynchronously so anyone can put a question there and you can answer it. And it keeps everybody out of meetings, and it allows people to ask very targeted, specific questions. And I found this to be very good at building trust and that collaboration across both of the organizations. And last is listen and help with quick wins. This is from March. This is the one that came to my mind most recently. But like we noticed that a bunch of lists in our app, they just like weren't sorted. So you would build something and it would get tossed into a list that you would use somewhere else, and it had no sort order. Someone in customer success said, "Hey, like, why do we do this?" And we were like, "Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. We were moving fast. We must not have thought about sorting a list. We probably should have." Took an engineer 5 minutes, and that person feels great, gives us better feedback, more engaged with the product, and something that really is quite quick and easy to be done. So that's how you build trust. Now we're going to talk about how you destroy trust and the things that you shouldn't do. So whenever you're thinking about changing something, I want you to remember Chesterton and his fence. So this is something from the early 1900s, where in a book, Chesterton basically tells this kind of parable about this person who wants to destroy a fence. And he says, no, you cannot destroy the fence until you know why it was built. So everything that's built has a lot of thought put into it. A fence, for example. You have to get the fence posts. You have to dig the holes. You have to lay and nail everything together. So someone had a very big intention to make this fence in that place. And if you don't know why, you probably don't have the right to destroy it, because you need to understand what was so important there in the first place, so you don't accidentally have to redo this later on. And I have many stories of this. Whenever you're releasing, you never know what the color of a button means. I always talk about that because sometimes you have whole CS playbooks built on the color of a button that you might not know, and it might just look like a color. But if there's that if statement that says if this, color that, try and figure out why. Another thing, watch out for creating confusion. You never want someone to come across as they're not experienced in front of customers or prospects. And that usually comes, in my experience, was around the pricing page. So if you're doing a lot of experimentation on the pricing page or something else that's very customer-focused, make sure you're able to give sales the heads up so they know that. Customer success, they know that, because it's never great for them to be in that situation where a customer says, hey, but I saw this on your website, or I saw this on your LinkedIn. So you need to be careful with these things. And then last, I love this GIF, right? He comes in, you've probably seen it. He comes in, the ship is just sinking, and he gets off on there, and he's like, yeah, things are great. That's the product manager after they release something on Friday, going into the weekend, like, yeah. And then customer success is going, oh my God, what's going to happen? And I've seen this happen time and time again. I've done it once. I've seen it on my teams. And you release something, and you think about it, and it's like, oh, it's fine. It's good. It's great. But customers notice this, and they notice this on Saturday. And guess whose number they have? They don't have yours. They have your friend in customer success. And now they're calling them. And your friend in customer success is going, why? Why'd you do that? Like, what's going on? So be careful about that when going into a weekend or a holiday, and think about your colleagues before shipping there. And so now that you have all of this trust, right? You're not killing it. You created it. Now I think you can use that to build a better product by experimenting together and with all of your colleagues instead of experimenting on them. So you might be thinking, what does that look like to experiment on them? So here's an example. Many PMs jump directly into product experimentation. So let's take a fake door test, for example, where you put a button, but that button doesn't actually have anything behind it, and you just say, like, oh, thank you. So that's what this is showing here. It's like, at this moment, we can't change the language. So I think that here, what you're doing is you're just putting in an experiment directly into the support part of the funnel, where the product is already there, people are already there, onboarded, they're using it. And yeah, well, it might be useful. I don't think it's as strong as experimenting together. And support might get questions, and there's a lot of things that come from that generate some confusion. So my suggestion is to coordinate these experiments for the best results. So working together with marketing, sales, and support, you can create the conditions for a double up. So I'm guessing not many people know what a double up is. I'm from a very small town in Michigan where we ride a lot on lakes with boats. But basically, a double up is a wakeboarding trick. And again, you would see this guy fly in the air. But it's a wakeboarding trick. And it's you go around in a circle, and the two waves come together. And when two waves come together, two things can happen. They can cancel each other out and become flat, or they can double up and make 2 times the size. And so in this case, I think about when you coordinate these experiments with marketing, sales, and support, you have that chance to double it up and have 2, 3x the impact you would than just having a fake door test. And let me show you an example of where I've done this in my career. So at TravelPerk, I had the opportunity to bring to market a product called FlexiPerk. It allowed customers to cancel business trips for any reason. Very fun product, especially during COVID. Lots of stories we can talk about over a beer later. But the big thing to teach here is we started with an experiment. And what that looked like was, hey, in marketing, we had an email campaign in a type form. So I coordinated with them. Let's just send emails to our current customers, see what that looks like. They'll go to a type form, they'll fill it out, and then it'll go to sales. Sales, hey, I have my friend in sales. One is a BDR who's used to like getting people excited, and then one's an AE who can handle pricing. And you know what? I'll buy them beer if they sell one of these within this price range. And then once we have them on, let's talk with customer success. Hey, customer success, let's build this spreadsheet so you can keep track of what's going on. And then here's a playbook where you can figure out what you need to do if something happens, how to handle that. And so actually our first version of FlexiPerk had no engineers, no engineering at all. It was just a great test from marketing, sales, and customer support that allowed us to learn a lot about the product. Because what we learned was that we missed a lot of things. So there was a lot of pieces that were a little bit rough. And this was great. And this is a bit of like how I think about the experimentation being a bit like the MVP model. So one thing I like to think about is, what's your goal? Are you burning cash to learn, or are you burning to earn? And I use burn here because I've been mostly at pre-profit startups, et cetera, but you could imagine whatever word you'd like there. Maybe it's shipping or something else. But when you burn to learn, you want to be very fast, you want to be very scrappy, and you don't need to think about all the definitions of features, and you can run along as you go building things. But when you're ready to earn, when you know this is a really good value, you're past that experimentation stage, that's when you need to burn to earn. And so at TravelPerk with FlexiPerk, we were burning to learn here, the one I just showed you, and then this transitioned into burning to earn. So there we started to invest more. We took that email campaign, and we said, hey, we could run some ads, build a landing page. We should put this in our pricing model. Actually, the whole sales team should sell this. We should make this part of their comp plan. And then, oh, wow, that spreadsheet is huge. We can no longer support that. So let's build a risk model that uses machine learning to better understand if people are going to cancel or not. And then, oh, yeah, by the way, let's build this other machine that can rebook different flights, hotels, and cars as new prices come up so that we can make better margin on this product. And so whenever I'm thinking about where we are in that process, are we trying to burn to learn, or are we trying to burn to earn? But all of these have the whole funnel in that experiment. So make sure when you're thinking about this, you're experimenting with and not on. Okay, but not all experiments work. It's a great story, Andrew. FlexiPerk was great, but what about all those experiments that don't work? And then you're stuck, big client, loves the experiment, and you have to tell them, hey, I have to kill it. Maybe they're not so happy. So how can you do that? How can you manage the feature creep here? Some ways that we've done this is we have like a no hacks rule within our engineering organization, which basically, to me, I translate that a bit to like no if statements. If you're going to build something, like it has to go for all the clients. You can be creative in how you do that, but like let's not say if X, then Y. Let's remove that. So some ways we've done this at Abacum, for example, is we started with embeds. So we knew that there was we had a lot of evidence that notebooks were the way to go for communicating financial information, but we didn't know exactly what people wanted their tables to look like, wanted their graphs to look like. We knew that we needed them, and we knew that we'd have to spend about 3 months building both of those. So what we did instead is we built in a week an embed, which allowed you to put any website directly in, or anything, just an iframe basically, and then we started adding in Google Sheets. And then these Google Sheets, we could build a ton of CS playbooks around so that they could actually build the Google Sheets in whatever way made sense, be very flexible with customers, and then we would learn. And this has been very successful. We built tables, charts, graphs, dashboards, everything here. And there's no if statements. So if the cost to carry from an engineering perspective is much lower than if we had made a number of if statements and directly done this for that or this for this customer. We also did this a lot at TravelPerk. This is one that I launched here called Concierge. And actually, the original version of Concierge was we had flights, hotels, trains, and cars. And we were like, getting a lot of requests from customers like, I want to book an Airbnb. Can you make an Airbnb integration? I saw this specific flight on this website that you're not integrated with. Can you help us with that? And we were like, okay, we could go and we could build an API for that. But what if we generalize the solution and just put a special request box where they can put a link, and then we'll manage it for them. And we'll go to that website, we'll book it, we'll put it back into TravelPerk and manage it that way. And so this was another one where here it's actually very successful, and we learned a lot through this. We offered it for free in the beginning, and then actually found that people were willing to pay for this service. So it was an experiment that we thought would be better for our customer success and keep costs down, and then customers were like, we love it. So we charged them. So one thing that you might see with this as well is like, I have a rule a little bit here, and I've mentioned this a couple times, that it's very hard, big customers, they can own your roadmap, et cetera, et cetera. I have a rule of thumb where I try and keep the largest client about 30% of total revenue. One, because 30%, yes, it hurts, but it's not probably going to kill the business. And the other is that as you grow, that 30% becomes less and less of your total revenue. So here's just a small table that shows the difference between growth rates. So if you're flat year on year, it's probably not great for you. You're going to have this client be 30% forever. But if you're growing at 4x, actually by next year, this client is 6%. And so if you built this thing for this client at one point, it's much easier to have that conversation a year down the line when they're only 6% of your revenue instead of 30. And you come from more of a position of bargaining of less fear, more of equal. And I found this to be a great way to manage those big requests. That growth really helps reduce that influence and fixes most things around a company and product org. So in summary, sales and success, like all disciplines, focus on their goals. Trust is built by being purposefully collaborative. And when you have that trust, experiment with and not on. And then know when you're burning to learn versus burning to earn. Keep your experiments clean, and remember that growth is your friend. Thank you.